Originally, this video was put onto my secondary gaming channel, Common Games. However, due to the fact that I have been going through a bit of a depressive state of late, didn't have the energy to work on new videos, and have a busy life, I figured that I'd post this here so you guys could see that I'm doing for my secondary channel and hopefully subscribe to that to see more content. Link in the description, so be sure to subscribe to that channel as I'm planning on doing a Halloween horror game month for October for it. Pokemon! Gotta love the hate the series now, right? I think I've made it perfectly clear that I'm a fan of Pokemon on my main channel, and how I've did a good portion of the analysis of the games, as well as critique of the games, in various videos. And funnily enough, because I disagree with, or thought that the discussion wasn't all that great during the debacle that was last year with bringing back the National Dex, I got called a shill for the series. Yes, just because I disagree with people like Sil Spectre and Twip, I am a shill. Let's ignore that I've criticized the series multiple times in the past. Is Pokemon a series that I enjoy? Yes, I grew up alongside the series, seeing its highs and lows. Is it perfect? Hell no, it's not. It's a series that has a ton of potential that I personally believe isn't being capitalized on in the recent incarnations. And with the DLC for the latest games coming out very soon, I figured now would be a good time to cover my issues with the series and attempt to explain how to improve upon them. So, not too long ago, I posed a question on my Twitter for my followers, asking them about features in the games that they really enjoyed. And much like every YouTuber who polls their audience, I automatically assumed that my less than 50k subscriber count is representative of the entire Pokemon community.
You just got pranked! Just got pranked!
The responses I received ranged from people applauding the mechanics such as the physical special split, the aesthetics as follow Pokemon, and really, that can be shown that the thing that people enjoy is the features that Pokemon has had in the past. And it's been well known that a lot of the time, unless it's a very key feature in the case of held items, abilities, or the physical special split that focused on the battle mechanics, developers of the games will often remove said mechanics.
It's over. Get out of my car now.
You leaving me? I thought you loved me!
Let's be honest here, it's something that people have complained about ever since the Gen 2 remakes ended. And obviously I can agree to an extent, but at the same time, the more flavored features aren't really necessary to have in the games. However, I don't think they really make or break the game in the series. I mean, let's take for example, two other long-running RPG franchises that have changed their mechanics between incarnations. Final Fantasy and Persona. Let's start with Persona since that's a series that has a lot less drastic change to it. Let's consider Persona 4 and Persona 5. Probably two of the most popular examples of the franchise. The major difference between the two is the way you get personas in the games. In Persona 4, you get them mostly in a randomized card game in order to get a new persona. Meanwhile, in 5, you have the system that was originally adopted from the Shin Megami Tensei series and the earlier Persona games, basically convincing your enemies to become your personas. Both have their pros and cons, since for Persona 5, it adds a bit more personality to the shadows and allows you to get other perks such as money and items. Meanwhile, Persona 4 had more of an aesthetic reason for the monsters, as for the most part, the shadows in Persona 4 have more of a connection to the dungeons. Albeit they are recycled from Persona 3, so take that with a grain of salt. Now let's look at Final Fantasy 7 and 8. Final Fantasy 7 has the materia system where you can essentially just equip magic to a character, meanwhile Final Fantasy 8 has the draw system, which is a similar mechanic, and how you can empower the characters depending on how much magic you can pull from the enemies and items. The point of this is to show that games in the same series don't need to have the same mechanics, although they do share some similarities with each other in order to be deemed good. And Pokemon, aside from the key battle mechanics and staples of the series such as abilities, the physical special split, and held items for example, are things that we can expect to be continued holding on in the future. Meanwhile, you have other things removed, such as follow Pokemon, the Dex Nav, and berry mixing. Ugh. Look, let's be honest here. Do I think that Game Freak should implement past mechanics from previous titles into the future?
Of course!
But let's face it, there are mechanics in the games that plain just suck and shouldn't be included. This right here is a small list of things that they removed, and while there are things that I do want to see returned, let's admit to ourselves that there are going to be some of these things that are just a pain in the ass to have. Roaming legendaries? Really? You'd want to have Pokemon that run away from you when they can and randomly appear on the map? Sky battles? A series of battles that were heavily panned because of the limited amount of Pokemon you could use? Super training? A very tedious process of EV training? Look, there are some mechanics that I want to see back. Of course there are. I'd also like to see them revamped and explored upon. Hell, the Dex Nav would probably be my go-to choice on this, and Game Freak should consider putting in some of their past mechanics in order to entice older players. Hell, the Versus Seeker would probably work too, as it would add a lot of replayability to people who want to go through the routes again and battle against stronger versions of past trainers. I've said it once and I'll say it again, the story in Pokemon has never really been all that great. At best, the deepest the series got outside of fan games was Black and White and Black and White 2, both of which were a bit of a deconstruction of the whole catching them all mindset that people had. Granted, Generation 5 is my favorite, and even I think the story for the games isn't all that great. Not that it's badly written, mind you, it's just some of the most simple ways of going about it. I'm not saying Pokemon has to take the route of fan games where people think that including things such like swearing, death, and time travel are things that make a story complex. No, what I'm saying is if the story is going to be basic, you should really nail the characters of your story. Make it more character-based around it if the main story isn't all that enthralling, like it was for Sword and Shield. And the sad thing is, we've seen this actually come from Pokemon. Recently, Pokemon has been releasing animated shorts known as Twilight Wings, which is basically showing some great characterization for characters like Hop, Bee, and Nessa. We're seeing a deeper side to these characters, which is something that I love. What I hate is that these aren't in the damn games. This is something that I never really understood. Pokemon clearly has the assets to get the small animated shorts of their characters here. Why not incorporate that into the games? Here, let's take Hop for example and how this could have easily been incorporated into the game. For example, one way to do this would be giving his Wooloo a custom model that has a charmer on its leg. Make the Wooloo be an actual character that interacts with Hop, not like the Pokemon hasn't done this in the past before. And there are even potential to have a scene where Hop and Wooloo, after Hop removed Wooloo from his team in order to evolve, actually have a heart-to-heart and causes Wooloo to evolve into Dovewool. Basically capitalize the bond between the two. Then there's Nessa, who's shown to have a modeling career going on in Twilight Wings. Why not incorporate that into the games as well? I mean, in the original games, you had to find her in order to get to her gym battle. Why not have her be doing a photo shoot during this time frame? In order to get close to her, you had to battle the camera crew. Hell, there's potential to really make the story more character-focused, because if you're going to have the player take a backseat to most of the action in the game and focus on the gym challenge, why not focus on the characters since the gym leaders are the main event? And there was actually an attempt with this with Hop, Bede, and Marnie, but it just fell short of actually being good. So if the main story is more disconnected from the player, why not focus on making the characters stronger? I once made an entire video on this, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much on that, but essentially, Game Freak needs to really understand that a good portion of their audience isn't just kids anymore. Sure, Pokemon is a kids game. I'm not going to contest that. But you'd have to be stupid not to realize that some of their core audience is obviously from the older demographic, and one way to keep that demographic is to offer the audience a challenge. Now, I'm not saying give every trainer 6 Pokemon, that'd be straight up a slog to go through in the story. And we do need to be respectful of the player's time and energy. This is where I'm going to bring up the obvious idea of including different modes of difficulty: easy, regular, and of course the challenge mode. The only time that Pokemon ever did this was in Generation 5, and it was a system that had one fatal flaw to it, and that was that you had to unlock it by beating the other version of the game and transferring over keys via linking. That's kinda kneecapped by the fact that Pokemon games typically have one save file per game. I seem to recall that Resident Evil got lambasted for this a while ago. So the prospect of unlocking the difficulty would actually cost the player some other challenge to get to. But enough of me complaining, I'm sure you guys are more interested in seeing what I would refer to as a challenge mode. Well, Here's what would be needed to change in order to make the game's challenge mode work. Number 1, have major characters like rivals, gym leaders, league members, major players in the enemy teams, etc. have one additional Pokemon to their teams, as well as having their teams have more move pools and possibly have held items. Number 2, raise the level of all trainer Pokemon to be increased by a set amount, like 1 through 5 levels. Number 3, increase the AI difficulty of enemy trainers. This would be for everyone so they don't do stupid things like use Splash against your monster. And number 4, increase the IVs of certain trainers' Pokemon to level 30. Again, rivals, champions, gym leaders, etc. The last 3 are pretty self-explanatory, as they would make certain trainers' Pokemon be more difficult to defeat, all the while have the trainers be smarter. Like, you wouldn't see them use useless moves on your Pokemon when they are about to faint unless they can't help it. So I want to focus on the first suggestion more. To do that, the easiest way to do this is to make a comparison. For example, let's look at Roxy from Pokemon Black and White 2.
Roxy.
In her normal mode, you only face off against a Coughing and a Whirlipede, the former only having 3 moves. You'll also notice that even though they're poison types, they also have moves that can be used to counter psychic type Pokemon. But they're looking at the second gym leader in the game, and there is a lack of psychic types that you can get at this point in time. Now, if we look towards her challenge mode, you'll see that she has a third Pokemon. All 3 of her Pokemon are at a higher level than the normal mode, as well as having 4 moves each. Whirlipede has a more logical moveset to counter the more common flying types, and 2 of her Pokemon have held item to restore health. This is good not only because it's up the ante in a numerical scale with the simple leveling, but it also has more strategy planned in the game. What do I mean by that? Well, consider all 3 of Roxy's Pokemon have moves like Smog, Poison Gas, and Poison Sting. All moves that have a percentage of actually inflicting the poison stat onto your Pokemon, which is not only a pain in the ass to deal with, but also has the nasty side effect of all her Pokemon knowing her signature move, Venoshock.
Shocking, isn't it?
If she manages to use that move against your Pokemon while it's poisoned, you'll be hit, and hit hard, with an attack that's at 130 base power. It's a simple addition, but it makes her team a bit more tricky to deal with and make you consider your options. Do you waste a turn using an item to cure your Pokemon of poison, or do you swap it out? Both result you in losing a turn and taking damage. There's actual thought put behind her team and the opportunity to face a massive challenge in that regard, but not too much that the players can't get over that hurdle. In comparison, let's look towards the second gym leader in Sword and Shield, Nessa. Well, yes, while all her Pokemon have 4 moves to their name, there's no synergy between her team, as well as all of them having a straight up weakness to pure grass or electric type moves. Anecdotal, I'm sure, but I managed to steamroll her team with my Bolt Hound.
Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy?
And the sad thing is, there are plenty of Pokemon to make her team more balanced and could be used to cover weaknesses. Have her use one of the following lines: the Wooper line, the Chinchou line, the Lotad line, the Marnie line, the Palpitoad line, the Quillfish line, the Barbeluch line, etc., etc. Those alone would be at the very least make it so the player character couldn't just use the singular grass or singular electric type to mow through her team. Or at the very least, give Nessa's Pokemon the ability to use Rain Dance, to at least power up her team's water moves or utilize the fact that all 3 of her base Pokemon have Swift Swim as an ability. And none of them have a move to make it rain, aside from Dreadnaught's G-Mex moveset. But that's a moot point, since that's her last Pokemon. I can see the basis of an interesting Rain Sweep strategy utilizing the Swift Swim ability, but it's lacking one key detail, and that's only one Pokemon has the ability to make it rain, and it's her last one. Can you see the reason why I find this infuriating? They have the ability to make the team actually have a smidge of difficulty, but the developers are severely kneecapping it by removing one simple factor. Hell, if they wanted to, there was one simple way to get past this too, and it's something that I brought up in my Pokemon Challenge video on my main channel, and that's giving the gyms an additional bonus, other than G-Maxing. Sticking with Nessa, why not have the stadium create an artificial rainstorm that doesn't end? It'd be the same thing as in the older generations, as when it rained in the overworld, it would translate into the battles. Boom! There you go. You've got Nessa's team being much faster than yours, as well as getting a boost from their water attacks by the effect of rain. Instant challenge, just add water. It's like cup ramen. It's things like this that make me not really care for the directors sometimes. I know the developers are just doing what they're told, and it's really the game directors that I have an issue with this in this regard. It's almost like the head honchos don't seem to understand that there's a big part of their audience that is seen neglected in that regard. And that's why I suggested having a difficulty section. You want an easy time? Select the easiest route. You want to have a challenge? Choose hard mode. It's a simple aspect, and it's really weird that Game Freak has never considered it, save for one entry in the entire series. I mean, I love Generation 5, don't get me wrong, but this really should have been carried over into other games. And it's not like it would be too difficult of programming to make a more challenging battle system for the higher difficulty. Adding one Pokemon, giving existing Pokemon held items, or adding a level or two here and there. I can't imagine that sort of programming would be too difficult to incorporate. But who knows, I'm not an employee of Game Freak. Maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about in this regard. I've talked about this in other videos before, and I've highlighted in this one, but one of the biggest issues that I have with Pokemon and the series is that I feel that it needs to appeal to the older audience. Let's face it, when Pokemon first came back out in the 90s, there has always been a fan base that grew alongside it over the years, and most of these kids in the 90s are now adults. A good portion of them still buying the games if you look at the sales records for Pokemon Sword and Shield. They're considered to be some of the best-selling games in Pokemon for a long time. And I feel it's a bit disrespectful to the older fans that Game Freak has practically starved them out of the targeted demographic. Yes, getting younger people into the series is necessary. You should always consider getting new people into your audience. That's pretty much a given in whatever medium you're trying to get into. Hell, I'm attempting to appeal to a new audience with this channel and video, so I can't blame Game Freak for trying to get new people to take into my creative content. What I can take issue with is that they're neglecting the older fans and the fans that pretty much built the series as it was today. I'm not saying Game Freak should go all dark and gritty for Pokemon.
Oh, the sounds, I don't like them. Ah, fuck! No! I'm Pikachu! Fucking fuck! I tried to push it! Oh my god!
But they should at the very least acknowledge the older audience, and I'm not just talking about, ooh, look, it's red and blue from Generation 1 in Pokemon Sun and Moon! That's what we call, kids, pandering! I understand Generation 1 is the most iconic. After all, it doesn't matter if you're perfect or not, so long as you're the first, people will recall you much easier. Pokemon, Power Rangers, the N64 games, the guy who thought it'd be a fun idea to stick a fork in an electrical socket. Damn it. You get the idea. More often than not, when it comes to pop culture, so long as you're the first to do something, you'll be the one that sets the bar for others. But that doesn't mean that we should have it stuffed down our throats. There's nothing wrong with a little pandering here and there, but not at the expense of actually providing substance to your older players. This is why I'm a huge fan of Generation 5, because in that generation, you had pandering could actually be used well, especially with the Pokemon World Tournament, where you could battle previous gym leaders, champions, and prominent trainers, and make the fights challenging. But hey, that's just one guy's opinion who's been with the series since Generation 1. What the hell do I know? You guys ever hear of Final Fantasy 13?
Oh my god!
That's kind of how Pokemon has become, especially in the latest generation. Go to point A, go to point B, go to point C, hang me now. Look, there are some actually marvelous locations in Sword and Shield, but they are severely kneecapped in the exploration aspect. There's no going off the rails, there's no maze-like dungeons, and the towns are shrunk down to even some of the basic of basics. I'm not saying implement a small list of side missions on the level of Fallout. I'm just asking that we expand the towns and worlds so we can actually explore and learn more about the region on our own. Half of the fun of the older games was actually going around the towns and seeing who these people are and finding little secrets. I remember back in Generation 1 when I went to Celadon, I actually found out this little secret where I could go into the back of a building and then I'd get an Eevee for my troubles. It was a nice little surprise, but we don't get anything like that in the newer games. Probably the worst offender in this case would have to be Spike Muth, which is just a single hallway! And that sucks! Because I love the design of Spike Muth. I love the concept, but we're not able to explore it at all. Can't enter any buildings save for the Pokemon Center, and there's nothing really to explore there. Game Freak, just what the hell were you thinking, you stupid mother... Look, I know this is a touchy subject, especially when we've come off the heels of last year where everyone and their mothers were complaining about the graphics in Sword and Shield. I personally think that people blew that situation way out of proportion. Like, I'm seriously getting tired of seeing the stupid damn tree being referenced. Now, I'm not a stickler for graphics. I'm of the mind that while graphics can certainly affect a person's perception of a game, to give an example, I think Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time's graphics haven't aged well at all. However, I think something like the Ace Attorney game's graphics have aged well due to their cartoony nature. It's a weird thing to consider here and there, and it's not something that people should be declaring that these are objectively good or bad graphics. Whether or not you think the graphics are good or they're bad, that's up for you to decide. Just don't leave a comment telling me that the graphics are bad. Of course, saying that, I know people are just going to do that in an attempt to piss me off. Well, whatever. What was I talking about? Oh, right, graphics. Look, like them, hate them, doesn't really matter. Personally speaking, if you were to ask me, I wish Pokemon would go back to the days of original sprite work. Not like sprite work has been phased out of the gaming landscape. I know it's not going to happen, but consider us an evolution that Pokemon's art style should be considered just to give it a bit of flair. Or, you know, they could use another art style that's taken from another very popular gaming franchise that Nintendo seems to have screwed over a few times. This video is probably pointless. I'm willing to bet that the Pokemon Company will never see this video, not only because of the cultural gap and how Japanese developers wouldn't actually listen to the guy from the West who has a YouTube channel, but more or less because the company has shown to be rooted down in its practices. Do I like Pokemon? Like I said at the beginning of this video, yeah.
Of course!
However, their business practices are extremely terrible. The split copies, even in this day and age, the lack of changing graphics from the 3DS, the removal of features, the lack of respect for an older demographic. And you know what the worst part is? It is because of the fans. We've supported this business practices for decades at this point, all because of this stupid yellow rat. Is there a way to fix Pokemon? Yes, there is. But ultimately, it's pointless since Pokemon has become more of a business than something that was based off the experience of catching bugs as a young lad. Exploring caves, forests, towns, and what have you, just to find that next magical little creature. Traveling across the land, searching far and wide. It's Pokemon. The power is inside. I don't know, maybe this is because I'm an old codger, and maybe I'm just nostalgic for wanting to have this game series appeal to me again. Maybe, just maybe, there might be issues with the core games that need to be addressed, that Game Freak, Nintendo, and the Pokemon Company aren't really listening to. I realized throughout this video that I've been expressing my opinions pretty passionately. I'm not saying my suggestions or complaints are objective. As with any opinion, it comes with the ability to have a fallacy attached to them. So if you guys have any thoughts on the video or the Pokemon games, and would like to give your suggestions on how to improve upon the games, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm Kamen. Thanks for watching.